Welcome to Turtlebird Reviews. I'm Luke.
And I'm Kayla.
How do we start?
So we tell them why we're here today.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Guys, we're here to review the movie Tenet because we saw it and we want to talk about it.
Yeah. It was released in the U.S. on September 3rd, and we saw it a week after it came out. It's the first film that we've seen in theaters since the lockdown, which is probably true for a lot of people.
Yeah.
So as for the film itself, it's a story about secret agents trying to prevent the event that causes World War III with the aid of time manipulation, kind of time travel, but not exactly.
Yeah. So people in the future invented this thing called time inversion, which allows them to reverse the entropy of an object or a person and send them backwards in time instead of forwards. So instead of just teleporting you back like 100 years ago, it just reverses you from where you are, and then you just travel backwards.
Right.
And
so for an individual, the flow of time remains the same. You're just going backwards. So this is another Nolan film. Who's your favorite director? He likes to tackle really vast concepts, especially the exploration of time, in how it affects different things like how it passes in dreams and in memories and
Inception's about dreams. Travel. Interstellar is about space and some more
like
stuff
time
beyond that.
bending in space.
Christopher Nolan is very, very experienced with doing non-linear storytelling, and he continues to do it with Tenet.
Yeah. In this case, it's exploring how the future affects the past rather than the past affecting the future.
How it works is if you invert yourself and then go back, and then you invert yourself again and go forward, then you're watching yourself again along your, the original path. Even if you do go back and you try to do something different, that will only be part of the original timeline, and you can't change anything really.
Working off the theory that what has happened will always happen. And it's also pretty easy to understand the concept.
Yeah, I mean, it's easy to understand how it works, but it's very, very, very hard to think about once you actually start seeing what they do on the screen with it. There's still scenes that we'll talk about and we'll be like, wait a second. And we'll have to really think about how it went down, which to me shows just how detailed Nolan's script was in this. And I think it's really good.
Yeah, all the clues, all the little details are there in the scene, and you can think about it and revisit it. And that's why it's part of the reason why it's such a good film is that you can think about it long after you've left the theater.
Yeah.
I mean, one thing to be said about people saying that this film is a little bit inaccessible, it is very complex.
Yeah.
And for the first half of the movie, you kind of don't really understand what's happening. It's really hard to understand what's going on, but at the same time, it's engaging enough that I don't think you've lost anything.
I'd say for a lot of people, it's going to be the first viewing that's really difficult.
Yeah.
You're going to watch it all the way through the first time, and then at the very, very end, there's some things that make sense, but you're still going to be like, wait a second. There's going to be a lot of the plot that you need to just go back and rewatch it. And some people are not going to like that. Some people are going to think it's too, it's too overly complex and overwritten and overdone. But I really appreciate a film where you can just go back and rewatch it and rewatch it and rewatch it, and there's so much there every single time you go back to it. As with any time travel movie, Tenet does have some issues and some inconsistencies. Everything makes sense, but that's only really true within the rules the movie gives you. There are definitely some things that are a little impossible the way they happen, or I've noticed there's one or two plot holes where the way time inversion works, they could have just done something a little bit different, and they wouldn't have had to, do it the way they did in the movie. So there's a couple plot holes and a couple inconsistencies.
This version of time travel requires a certain suspension of disbelief.
Yeah.
So one thing about the film, even if it's difficult to understand, you're also never bored. Something is always happening. We're always moving somewhere. We're always traveling to a new location. And it is like a globe-trotter,
It's a heist movie, kind of.
Almost in that sense,
It's a spy movie, for sure. And Tenet, Nolan himself has mentioned that Tenet is based on spy thrillers that he grew up with. So it definitely has that feel to it.
You're always looking forward to something. Like, it feels urgent. It feels real. The world feels real, and it's just vast.
As far as the acting goes, everybody's pretty spot on. I'd say I don't know. There's not much I can really criticize with the acting.
I don't know about the other actors, but I know John David Washington did a lot of his own stunts.
So as we get into like the characters and writing, I'd say that even though the actors' performances are really good, where the strengths of the movie are really shown in the action scenes and the spectacle and the visuals, I'd say the weaknesses kind of show up more in the motivations for certain characters and the emotional attachment you have. Because the way Nolan writes it, it's very, very, very plot driven. You don't get a ton of time, especially with the protagonist, which he's called the protagonist, John David Washington. You don't get a lot of time with him to really dwell on what he's going through as a person. It's kind of just go, 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 next scene, next scene.
Yeah, you're not given much to develop empathy for the protagonist character. We don't know anything about him necessarily. He's
very much a blank slate at the beginning of the movie. And he develops a lot more as it goes on. Because you see the protagonist really starting to come into his own. And his relationships with the characters that he's working with the whole time start to come into a really important point near the end of the movie. That's pretty much the best part for him. Earlier on, he's just kind of a CIA agent. He's cool.
We're not given any history with him. We're not sure what motivates him to do what he does in the film.
Yeah.
As far as
at least in the beginning,
internally, because he kind of just does things because he's a good moral person. The character Kat, he wants to help her because she's in a really bad situation. The other thing with his character, and even down to the fact that we don't even know his name, the fact that he's called the protagonist, seems like it's kind of an intentional choice. He's almost an everyman character. Maybe that's not exactly right.
I'd say he's like, Nolan's definitely trying to create a point of view character, and it works really well. You get to see everything through his eyes. When he goes in the time inversion machine and he's going back in time, we see it from his perspective. So the whole world is moving backwards. That's really clever. To have it all from his perspective so that we get to see it as it happens and we're going through the mystery and solving it right as he is. But even with that really cool perspective, I think the protagonist is not nearly as interesting of a character as Cobb from Inception or Cooper from Interstellar. Some of his other protagonists are a lot better written and just have a lot more to them.
For most stories, you have it divided into two camps where we have plot-driven stories and we have character-driven stories. This is a plot-driven story. But the other thing with the protagonist, in that we don't have any history, we don't have any past for him. And I feel like that's intentional because Nolan's still going with a theme of his future is way more important than his past. His future is coming back to him. And that's where you would get any sort of connection with him.
As far as other characters go, Neil is really cool to watch. Robert Pattinson did a great job with him. Kat is very, very good. Probably my favorite character as far as like empathy and relating to them and watching them on screen. The antagonist, Kat's husband in the film, he's not the best antagonist we've had from Nolan.
Well, people have accused him of being a stereotypical Russian,
bad guy,
overlord or whatever.
Yeah.
He does. That's the thing, is like Nolan does give him some motivation. There's a reason why he's doing what he does. He's not just like, I'm here to be evil.
But his reasoning could use a bit more fleshing out, I think.
One thing that's really strong here are the visuals and the practical effects.
For sure. And that's kind of a given for Nolan nowadays, but I'm really, really glad to see him using real sets. There's very little, if any, green screen at all. The action scenes are great, whether it's hand-to-hand combat or car chases or the plane crashing into a building. It's all very good. I say the visuals are top-notch, for sure.
He tried to do everything practically that he could. One thing I did read that there's less than 300 VFX shots in that, so it's less VFX than you'll find in like a rom-com. And the other thing is that the nature of the film, with time going forwards and backwards, means that they had to be very creative with how they shot this movie. There's
a scene where two people are fighting. One of them is inverted, one of them is not. And so you have this conundrum where one of them looks like they're normal and the other person like is doing reverse punches. Instead of doing this, he's doing this.
And same thing with car chase scenes where they're literally recording these cars driving backwards. Because time is reversed for somebody, so like all these people are driving backwards, and they'll shoot the same scene, but those cars are driving forward now. And like you'll have somebody else who's driving backwards who's supposed to be inverted. And it's pretty crazy.
It's very cool.
They went on location for everything. They actually traveled to these places around the globe. There's no like green screen backdrops in this film at all. And that makes you feel like you're there too. Like you can't replace it with CGI. It's not the same. The soundtrack is pretty great. Ludwig Göransson, he's the composer for Tenet. He's also Worked on Black Panther, The Mandalorian, Venom.
What we get in Tenet is a very, like, rigid, rhythm-based
he likes
soundtrack.
His heavy rhythms and syncopation. He likes a lot of dissonant chords.
Mm-hmm.
It's not a very melodic soundtrack at all. But it's great. It gives you, the feeling of driving forward, just tension all the time in this film. So, like, it's great for what it is. I wouldn't say that there's any pieces that are particularly memorable from it, but it does do its
fits
job
the scenes
in the film.
pretty good, though, yeah.
One thing along the lines of the soundtrack was the audio mixing in theater was probably one of the most frustrating things about this film. There are too many moments where you cannot understand what characters are saying.
There's a lot of plot in the movie, and a lot of the writing, a lot of the script focuses on the plot. And so you have these sequences where characters are talking about the plot. It's like really important, like when you invert, you need to have an awareness of these 3 things, and here are the most important 3 things you'll ever hear. And while the whole thing's going down, you got this thumping beat in the background, and you got the sound effects going on over here, and you can't really hear the dialogue as well. And this is something that Nolan has had before. He's kind of known for having a little bit unbalanced sound stages, and he does it on purpose because he wants it to feel more immersive.
There's a difference between having characters who can't hear each other if the other characters can't understand what's being said.
Yeah, that is the biggest criticism.
That's one thing,
I'd say.
but if, like in Tenet, where 2 characters are having a conversation, obviously one of them understands what the other is saying. It's just that we can't understand it. I would say that's probably the greatest weakness for this film. I mean,
as far as a viewing experience
as far
go.
as viewing experience, like the rest of it's pretty phenomenal.
I really enjoy it as a fan of Nolan's movies in the past, and just I really like how in-depth he goes with the idea of time inversion. I've never seen another movie, and maybe there's something out there, but I've never seen a movie that does this idea of time inversion and you going backwards while someone else is going forwards, and you actually like see it happen and collide.
It's a film with vast concepts. At least for me, like, I left the theater and I had that movie high that you have,
Yeah,
which
for sure.
I don't get as often now that I'm older.
Yeah.
There's not a lot of films that will do that, but it's just a really good experience.
If you're really into it for the time travel mechanics and the action and the set pieces and the spectacle of it, Tenet is not going to disappoint. As far as a letter grade for it, I'd probably give it an A. I don't know. A or A minus?
I would give it an A minus.
A minus is probably good.
Out of Nolan's films, I like Interstellar and Insomnia and probably Inception better.
That's about it.
Be sure to like and subscribe.
Leave a comment below with what you think about Tenet, if you've seen it. And stay tuned, because we're going to be doing some more reviews for more stuff. Netflix shows, movies, games, and other things in the future. So that's the plan for now. Adios.